So pacing can be a tricky subject in writing. It's something that a lot of authors tend to struggle with. At least I know that in some of the writing groups that I've been in, a lot of the questions have been surrounding the pacing of the story. They'll have an agent, they'll do a pitch to an agent, and sometimes they will read it and say, they'll read part of the story and say there's some issues with pacing. At least that's the response that I've gotten back from some of my colleagues. When you're doing your mid-level or even a higher detailed outline, something that I would recommend doing is attaching a purpose to every single chapter that you're outlining. I kind of do this in parentheses. I might say this chapter is character development. And I might even name the character that I'm working on. Like, the main purpose of this chapter is to take this character and really develop them further. And so that's the main goal of that particular chapter. That's what I'm trying to convey. There might be an informational chapter, and I'll put that out there, a discovery chapter. You can call it discovery too. They have discovered something important, integral to the story, and so it has a little bit more information in it. It might feel a little slower in the pace department because you're getting a lot of information and there's not a lot of action. You may have a chapter that is heavy on action. And you would mark that, as an action chapter. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces in this chapter, and it's going to move fast. You might have heavy plot and conflict. So you might put that as a chapter purpose, and the fact that, maybe there's a lot of dialogue in here. And so you're really kind of diving into conflicts, you're diving into plot, and you may even be diving into some character development as well. So I usually put a label with the purpose of each chapter. And the reason why I do that is because it helps me control the ebb and flow of my story. So I can adjust for pacing. One of the things that I do is if I have maybe I have too many character development and informational or discovery chapters in a row, and I'm like, man, that's really starting to kind of sag, especially in the middle. I'm like, I feel like the reader will get bored because there's not a lot of action going on in any of these chapters. And so maybe I will go back, and as far as in the timeline, I might move an action sequence up and move an informational sequence someplace else. Or I might play, the switcheroo with some of the timeline events in the story, just so I make sure that I don't have like a long lull of just boringness without engaging the reader in some kind of action or conflict, and make sure that we have a good, ebb and flow. Like I said, you have to have slow areas, but then you also have faster areas too. And that's hard to explain to individuals who are new to writing or, plotting out the first novel, is pacing. So some ways to speed up the pacing. You could definitely do action. Action moves that story along. It kind of propels it forward in a quick manner. You can do cliffhangers. Make the reader want to continue reading. That kind of increases the pacing of the story and get a feel. I know that, and I can't remember where I'd heard it from, and I think it was Anne Rice that wrote a book, and she designed the book so that at the bottom of each page, there was kind of like a little cliffhanger there that made the reader want to turn the page. Now, on her first submission to literary agents, she did not do this, and the book did not get accepted. So she made these changes, added these cliffhangers to the end of the page, resubmitted the book. It got picked up immediately. The literary agent loved it. Went to publisher, they picked it up, and then when they went ahead and published it, they couldn't understand why the book was not selling on the market. Why this was such a great book. It was a real page turner. Why is it not selling? Well, she revealed to them that that was how she had structured it, was to have that cliffhanger on the end of every page, so that when the reader turned it, you know, they couldn't stop reading. They had to keep going. And the publisher rearranged everything, and then, you know, boom. And I wish I knew which book that was, but I can't tell you. It's just something that I heard. I'm not suggesting, that seems like a little overkill, but definitely something to think about. Maybe leave a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter and make your reader want to start reading the next chapter. Dialogue. Dialogue can add tension between characters. It has to be done meaningfully, and it has to be realistic conversation. So I get into the, you know, a lot of people want the proper grammar and everything in the writing, but a lot of times whenever you're doing dialogue, it might not be, because we don't speak the same as we write. I have a book where I have a character that has a very, very thick accent, and so I actually write that, which makes it look like I have a ton of typos, but it's not, those aren't typos, those are just there to convey, you know, that particular manner of speech. Prolonged outcomes, so increase the suspense by extending the outcome of conflict. So maybe just leave your reader hanging, like something happened, and then we move on to something else, a different kind of chapter from a different point of view, and the reader's like, wait, hold on a second, what happened to this character in the last chapter? Make them wait a little bit for it. They want to move forward. Keep reading. Scene cuts and jump forward. You can use that to move the story along. Let's face it, sometimes, a lot of times in a traveling montage, there's not a lot going on. If you spend your time droning on and on about it, your reader will get bored, and they might put the book down. They might stop reading. Series of incidents in rapid succession. So speeding up the story, moving the scene from one scene to another very quickly, you know, like a domino effect, like this happens and then this happens and this happens, and then the anxiety and the anticipation of your reader is there. Short chapters and scenes, so you can do nice little easily digestible segments for the reader to pass through quickly, sweet and to the point. You can do some of a summary instead of going a blow-by-blow or a play-by-play approach. You can just kind of maybe summarize it. Good place to do that maybe is in some dialogue. Word choice and sentence structure. So using concrete words, active voice, and sensory information artfully embedded in your prose. So rather than having long drawn out sentences that take forever to read, make them short, sweet, to the point with a lot of detail, and make it pertinent details. And like I said, embed it in there. Don't just describe it, artfully do it. So those are some ways to kind of speed up. Slowing down would be, adding a lot of description, kind of stretching out the timeline, slowing way down. But those are some ways to kind of speed up and slow down the pacing of your story to keep your reader engaged.